AI is like one person entering the company, asking David, what is a customer? And David is giving an answer. And then he goes to Roberto, what is a customer? And Roberto is giving a completely different answer. And then he's the one hallucinating. We are the one hallucinating about that, right? We're the one not clear on that. But if you start to create models that are hyper-deterministic, if you start to treat people as systems, then the adoptability, the reception from the users of the model would be quite low. Because frankly, nobody wants to feel like a machine. I need to become nowadays more human than human in what I'm thinking, because the technology is so incredible that now it's pushing in the foreground us as really the differential between something that's good or bad. Up until now, I think we are still the only repository of how you can make something new. And that's what we need to focus on.
Some of Roberto Maranca's earliest memories revolve around sailing. Working on his family's 39-foot boat consumed a lot of his summers and holidays. It was a labor of love, one he carries through to this day.
It was my father's passion. We come from a long lineage of people that were almost born at sea. My first picture standing up are hanging on a boat on a beach. And I do have this memory of a big, piggy bank, one of those clay ones with a stylized sailing boat on it. So my father was actually having us putting little coins in it for one day, crowning this dream of his to own a proper boat. And the dream came true in 1984. He bought a bit derelict but incredibly beautiful sailing boat of 39 feet, 1934, made of wood, and it became not only our passion but our labor. Because a wooden boat at sea varnished was something that was very heavy in terms of maintenance, and that's how I started. Basically, I never looked back.
Selling that boat was difficult for Roberto and his family. In fact, the way he describes it makes it sound like an old flame. But he's creating new memories aboard his Enterprise dinghy, known for its distinctive light blue sails and racing performance. He named it Imanza, after the Brazilian goddess of the sea, his father's recommendation.
We had to sell it 20 years ago because of various reasons. The good thing, we sold it to a person that took it on the other side of Italy, because to me, seeing her in someone else's hands would have been unbearable. You want someone that was actually feeling for her the same love that you were feeling, because you knew that boat needs care, so you want someone that takes care of it. And we really dropped the price quite a bit because we saw that the guy was really in love with that, so he took it on the other side of Italy, and it's been having more or less the same relationship we had. I love the area around the southern part of my region. It's called Cilento. It's a beautiful pearl in the Med. But being in UK, I settled with a dinghy. It's a 4 meters. It's wooden. It's been built in 1983 in Nemanja, which is a Brazilian goddess of the water, kind of a name that came to him, and I took it. The peculiarity of this boat is the sails are blue, so it's very visible, and you can spot it from miles away.
Despite the dedication to the deity, Roberto admits to having a close call or two with some perilous situations, especially at night. But as the expression goes, the light is always darkest before the dawn.
It was always happening at night. Storms. There was one specifically, it was in summer 2000. We were coming back from probably 3 weeks out at sea, went all the way down to Sicily, which is 250 miles from my harbor. And I got to know a bit better the Strait of Sicily. All the winds are funneled there. And I remember basically trying to get somewhere safe and thinking, okay, am I going to make it? No, I was just with a friend of mine. It was 2 on the boat. In this thing, you have rain, you have an incredibly strong wind, you barely control the boat, and you don't know how much oil is left in the tanks, because of course there was no gauge because the whole boat. There are quite a few close calls like that, but also beautiful memory, like at the end when things are calming down, the feeling of, wow, it was a big thing, scary, but I've never felt more alive. You have moments in which you are hating and you're asking yourself, what the heck, why am I here? But then the moment you step off the boat, and I remember my harbor at the time was Salerno. Salerno is in the south of Italy. And basically on the way back home, because it's hilly, you are going up on the motorway and you see down back to the harbor and the sea. The first thought is always, okay, I'm going to be back tomorrow.
While the Enterprise is a two-person dinghy, Roberto admits he prefers his solo sailings, not because they offer him more time to think. Quite the opposite. It drowns out thought entirely, like a meditative experience.
It's a two-man boat usually. When I have crew on board, I enjoy it, but at the same time, I feel a bit like, okay, there's one too many here. I find sailing on a dinghy quite therapeutic, almost like meditation. I'm actually not thinking about anything because the boat is so demanding, especially when there is wind, right? So my positioning on my weight, the attitude of my body is so important. I don't have the time to think about anything else. So my brain has to be one thing with a boat, and that's why I find it therapeutic. So it's kind of you come back like, okay, now I can think again.
This is Ready Test Go, brought to you by Applause, the podcast on software quality and digital experiences. I'm David Carty. Today's guest is Maverick Mariner and Enterprise Data Excellence Practitioner, Roberto Maranca. Roberto has led data strategies at global organizations like Schneider Electric, Lloyd's Banking Group, and GE. And he has also been recognized multiple times as one of Data IQ's top 100 data leaders. He's also the author of the book, Data Excellence: How Data Leadership Can Drive Stronger Organizational Performance, which came out last year. Enterprise leaders face immense pressure to race ahead with AI, but navigating these choppy waters without a compass and a crew, that's a risky venture. Roberto argues that true differentiators for success aren't the tools themselves, but the quality of the data, the clarity of the business goal, and the human judgment that underpins the whole system. That's why he reframes data governance as a team sport. So let's grab our crew and hop to the discussion to learn why true data excellence requires everybody on deck. Here's Roberto. Roberto, you've described data excellence as being like a team sport. Can you describe what that means and what enterprise leaders can take away from that kind of framing?
Sure. So I would say the more data is effectively a sport, right? Data excellence is what I'm preaching to make sure that you're good at that sport. And I'm saying that because, as I say in the book, one of my 2-3 sentence of kind of a pet peeve of when people say, "Oh, data is IT," or "Now data is AI," when it's neither, right? Or even worse, when you go, "Data is new oil." Well, maybe it's like more the new nuclear fusion, given what we see in AI. So we are unleashing this genie. The reality is that you're not born good at it, right? Companies are not born good at it. If actually none of them are good at it yet, excellent at it. So you need discipline, you need a mindset, you need a resilient commitment to be good at this. So that's why I'm looking at a team sport, because it's involving everyone in the company. Is actually, even if you have a solo champion, you will never win the championship, right? Imagine if you're a team and only one of you is a champion, doesn't matter, because unless you're doing tennis, maybe. I mean, even in tennis, you need to have a coach and the assistant, and then, so there is always a team around people, even if it's a solo sport. That's why I think it is like a sport. So if people are starting to think, like in sport, I need to have an ambition, right? What I want to be, what kind of a sport I want to do. Then I need to understand what I'm good at, because I need to understand what's the gap between me and being a champion. And I need to rely on good people around me that will give him the right regime, the right, diet, the right, training, schedule, so that I get to where I want to be. And it's important that the leaders are understanding that your CDO, your data leader, your AI leader is not going to be the one that's going to make you win. You are the one. Then they're going to help you, but you are the one that I have to perform in the competition.
Absolutely. So I have to call foul if we can't completely complete that team metaphor. So who actually needs to be on the field? So what roles do the business
Right.
units, the product team, engineering, data, AI leaders, they all have their own roles. How do those all fit in together?
Well, the most important role is, of course, my data athlete, right? The business leader wants to do something, right? It's all, we're all within, right? And whoever is going to be the one around them, especially on the data side, I like to use this metaphor, the data personal trainer. Why? Because I am the one asking you, talking to you, understanding what you want to do. So your ambition is your mindset. Are you sure? And then I'm the honest and probably more, expert person that is going to help you to understand whether that's within your reach. And if it's within your reach, what do we need to do? So these are the two key roles. Then there are kind of side roles in which you need someone that, for example, helps you to really design and maintain and define what are the standards that you want to put around data. So, and I'm very, very uh, keen now, especially in these days of AI and here and AI there, that you have someone that is really owning the meanings for the company. So what is that we call customer? What is that we call contract? And I call it in the book, I call them as data domain owners, but there are many other. You can call data champion, data trust leader, whatever. The reality is that there's one person or one group, and not everyone, that can define what is it for the company. And by the way, that's one of the key not to have AI hallucinating, because we say, oh, AI hallucinating. No, AI is like one person entering the company, asking David, what is a customer? And David is giving an answer. And then he goes to Roberto, what is a customer? And Roberto is giving a completely different answer. And then he's the one hallucinating. We are the one hallucinating about that, right? We're the one not clear on that. So these are three of the most important roles: the athlete, the personal trainer. And then I think what you want to do is to, whatever is decided, whatever is built on use cases, you want also have a standardized and developed and scaled around the company. So fundamentally, you need a design function. You need someone or something or a group of someone and something that helps you to make sure that the fabric of your company is receptive of these standards, this use case, and delivers the ability for the data athlete to do what they want. Maybe you can call them the gym owner, right? The guy that buys has got the gym, has got all the all the equipment ready for you to use, or they gives you the playground where you to go and run and train. But in reality, you need something around there that it creates the premises and the all the elements for you to perform at the best, to be ready for your performance. So you can call it design architecture, you can design authority again, but designing this for the right thing is important.
The gym owner is definitely missing from my team. I need to go see him and link that back in. But that's my personal life, so we'll leave it there.
Yeah,
So these different team members often define success differently. To your point, right? You mentioned this with
correct.
hallucinations. So how should leaders create and reinforce some of those shared objectives around data and AI that help cut across those functions?
Yeah. So let me tell you first why things are failing, right? So the my observation is that AI and data now let's use them interchangeably, although they're not. But let's say, but fundamentally, the things we want to do with our data, let's put this, are usually failing or having problem because first of all, data is very tribal. It's very tacitly allowed to grow internally to a company. So everyone can call anything the way they want, right? And that's a problem. So the second thing is data is usually an afterthought, like AI now. Well, AI maybe is more prominent, but the problem is that when you're trying to do something with data or something that requires a creation of analytic products or something like an agent, call it, so you hardly think about what data I need, how good is that, is it, am I sure day one? Usually that question presents you when you go into testing and things are going badly, right? And then the third thing why things are failing is that usually it's difficult for people, our data analytic finds difficult to connect how better is the data, how better is my value. So that ability to create a nexus between, oh, you give me a bit more of this and I have a bit more of that is very difficult. And that creates the problem that as I not having a quid pro quo, so to speak, in data, my investment might be not enough, might be in the wrong place, and so on. So because these are the three things I'm missing, my answer, apart from a substantial change into the way we think about this, so there is a cultural revolution you have to have internally. You can show up to your engineers or your product leader and say, okay, there you go, you are agile. That's a post-it with a description of what I want. Goodbye. Let me know when it's done. Right? This cannot be like that anymore. So it has to be a cooperation. Again, it's team sport. And apart from that, in the methodology I put together, because you need the methodology, you need the training plan, you need the circuit. And the fundamental piece that is at the center is what I call data consumer story. Now, in a complete disclosure, that's of course stolen from the agile development. You have the user story, but here we're talking more like the consumer story. And the consumer story is the place in which I understand what outcome you need to generate what actions, and who's the agent for the action, what is the knowledge you need, what are the sources you need. So you try to tie in the elements and the features of your product, so you know, and you have almost a contract at the end of, okay, so you're telling me that if this is what you need and what you need is made this way, then if I give it to you, you're going to use it, right? Because that's how you align objectives. Because if you think about, once the data athlete tells you that, then in line you're going to have, okay, I'm the personal trainer, the data leader is going to understand what I need to do. I turn around, first person I call is the famous owner of the meanings. Are you okay with what this person is asking you? Because we might be asking you a customer classification with 15 different classifications. Guess what? In the company we have 12. So why we should use that one? And after that you say, okay, and now that is asking customer for this classification, is counting on those to make a determination of a discount. But do you know what's the status of customer classification system? Oh, I can see it's only 1 in 10 are there. All right, so 1 in 10 times we're going to have a discount derived. So is this still additive and is good for the value you're trying to deliver? Or do we need to think about or plan to spend more money to make sure that the data is going to be good enough before you can actually create that? So you see, it's all aligned. This alignment is basically spans and is going from top to bottom, from left to right in your use case development, and involves all the different people aligned from the requirement to the visualization and delivery along the same story. So we have a trait d'union, a fil rouge, as they say in France, that it will tell you exactly where we are, and this critically will give you at a certain point the ability to say, hang on a second, very early, you're asking for this, but do you realize that this is going to be only available to you 1 in 10 times? So are you still want to invest this? Do we go? We don't go. But now we don't say that based on a political judgment or gut feeling. We say that based on the data we know that is not there and is not good enough for what you're trying to do. So that's what I'm trying to put in place in terms of alignment.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you're speaking to what you see as the fallacy of data quality being an IT owned problem, and you can
Yeah.
go down different levels of granularity with that. But you've worked with executives, C-level leaders, product leaders, right, all up and down the organization. How do you reframe this for them? They want better performance from AI and digital systems. How do you explain it on that type of level and ultimately help drive toward that better outcome?
So AI is definitely the multiplier, the force multiplier, but it's not the solution itself, right? So the thinking that, again, IT is the solution of everything, or thinking that there is an app for it, it might be true, but it might never gonna be the app you really need, right? So the issue is always that. So the the IT is become incredibly powerful. You can do everything. So what's the real difference now is understanding what is the gap between what you need, right, and what you can do with the IT. So in terms of reframing all of this, I'm also trying to push now that AI needs a lot of context and needs a lot of data intelligence. So given that coding and the IT is no longer a big issue because you can have the power you want, why don't you retrench yourself on what you really want? Back to what I'm saying, the consumer stories. Why don't we really work on creating a semi-perfect understanding of who we are? So that context, that meanings, we can feed it to an AI system, and the AI system will be much better aware, in inverted comma, on what's the boundary of validity of its action, and we can obtain a much better outcome. So in reality, what I've seen many times in problems in scaling our AI solution is that we have this beautiful thing built in a lab, right? In incredibly sanitized condition. Is all there, perfect temperature, perfect thing, perfect everything. Oh, works fantastically. Oh, look, I can actually do a prediction of churn based on the CEO, shoe size, right? It's incredible. But what happens then? Then I go from POC that works to pilot. And the first thing is I'm exposing this little thing that's still in a greenhouse effectively to a big greenhouse. But the conditions are not perfect, but I chose the pilot of kind of the best one I could choose because I knew that was the easiest one to do. Fine. We commit to that. We decide to go for it. We release this thing in the open, and this beautiful thing will find cold, storm, absolute starvation, and dies. Because, of course, the operational environment is very different from the environment in which we were trying to nurture this algorithm, this model. And by the way, I'm talking also about LLMs, right? Don't stop that to your usual machine learning. This happens with LLMs as well, or RAGs, or whatever you want to put on top of that. So the issue is that the more work your data personal training does with you in creating the good data intelligence, or knowing what is out there, knowing Socratically, and we're going to get to Socrates, right? No, we say know thyself, right? I think that for me is the first cardinal, commandment of a good data personal training. If you don't know yourself, if you don't know your posture as a company, you cannot have your AI growing and scaling because you don't know exactly. And so there will be always conditions that are outside the model boundaries. So they will always bound to lack to scale. So the more you know, the more your intelligence of data is high, the lower is your debt to data, because debt to data is the bad data is out there that is going to make this thing falter and stumble. The faster and the easiest it's going to be scaling AI. That's how I refocus people.
Yeah, you read my mind because these have to work outside of the sandbox environment as well. And when we were
Yeah,
talking before, you said that quality is human centric and that methods like the Socratic method can reveal a lot about your product. So
right.
when we're talking about deeply human characteristics, which certainly surface down at the tail end of a product lifecycle, right? Whether we're talking about things like aspiration or empathy, how are technology leaders trying to solve that problem today, and where do those systems currently fail?
I think it stems from, in my view, it has to stem from the appreciation that buying, which is what we're trying to influence, yeah, right? So whether, and by the way, whether you have a product like a financial product, or if you're a charity, or if you're even a public administration, at a certain point you need to have someone buy into what you're doing, whether with money or with trust or whatever. That buying thing in our brain is a very, very emotional thing. So there isn't enough data that I can throw at you to deterministically 100%, be sure that that's what you're going to do next. So, and if you start from that, you need to understand that you need to put this into your models. So if you start to create models that are hyper deterministic, if you start to treat people as systems, then two things are happening. First, your model might not work as expected. Second, the adoptability, the reception from the users of the model would be quite low, because frankly, nobody wants to feel like a machine. So in a in substance, I think there is a although is underestimated, I think the engagement and participation from your user, your customer, even your, think about all your third parties, your suppliers, your investors, is augmented if you're actually augmenting your EQ in whatever you do. So you need to take that into account. Basically, you're not, I'm not expecting you to code that into a model, but I'm expecting you to understand that you can be data driven, right, but human led. So you need to have both in front of you. That's for me is the essence of the digital neo-humanism, because I need to become nowadays more human than human in what I'm thinking, because the technology is so incredible that now is pushing in the foreground us as really the differential between something that's good or bad, right? So technology itself, as we know, hallucination, or when people say, oh no, such and such model is lying, they're not lying. They're just They're just inferring from what you're saying. So if you're leading them to lie, yeah, but that's your interpretation. Reality is now this is pushing an immense mirror all around us. It's reflecting us every day. And I think as a data leader, as leaders in general, we need to think a bit different in the way we deliver things. So we need to take this human aspect much more centric in what we do.
Isn't it funny how as a user we can so quickly now with these LLMs jump to the conclusion that, oh,
Oh,
this
mama,
one's empathetic and this one's a liar and this one has X, Y, or Z motive, and really it's our interpretation of those systems. So it
absolutely.
is pretty fascinating. And this all gets to what you were just talking about, which is, doing right by your users. And there's that means a lot, right? So how should organizations try to balance that subjective business context with the need for consistent standards, consistent governance, and consistent accountability? Because I think this is an area where a lot of enterprises struggle today, especially at scale.
Yes. Well, and I've worked with few companies that are big, and basically, when I was talking before about the data domain owners as the owner of the meanings or the standards, well, standard doesn't mean one color. Standard has to mean a palette of standards, right? So when we balance things, and let's stay on simple things like the referential that you have to have in a company, and golden taxonomies, call it the way you want. So those are the axes of reference or where you see data, measure data in a company. So they're quite important, right? Because if you don't take care of them, everything becomes relativistic, and everyone is measuring their own data, we're in a sort of a data multiverse in which guess what's the dynamic in the board. Oh, tell me how we going. Oh, I'm growing 3%. Ah, you're growing 3%. You're growing 3%. You're growing 4%. How come the company is tanking 5? Because possibly we're having different view of the world. So we need to resolving this doesn't mean having everyone agreeing on one standard because it's impossible, right? Resolving this is basically to agree to disagree. And agree to disagree means that when we approach standard governance, we need to try to, back to my point about data intelligence, to know where we are. Because if we know that, we actually can take countermeasure. So I'm an engineer, and I know that if you want to move from these three axes here to these three axes there, there's a simple, transformation of the axis. Basically, you can measure the same point in the two axes of reference, and you're fine. Right. I don't want to become too technical, but the reality is, yes. What's the problem if someone in China is calling the customer, I don't know, the customer cheese and dairy producer, and instead the one in France wants to say no, there has to be a Roquefort, or has to be I want to be precise, right? There is no problem until the moment you want to put all the data together. We want to make sense of it. At that point, you need to have your standards have to be comprehensively, that to be inclusive. Actually, is a good point of having inclusiveness coming through the back door, because this is inclusiveness as well. So you might want to have the possibility to understand how different we are, and you need to take the countermeasure. Now, of course, I'm not saying that everyone has to sit in their own standards, but think about this, right? We are approaching the moment in which there's going to be a complete, like in marketing, we're seeing that with the agents, right? There's going to be a complete disjoint approach between what is that I want to do with my data and a centralized team that's going to do that. Because I can ask my chat, say, hey, give me an infographics of today's sales, right? So basically, you skip around any enterprise dashboard. So what's going to be the only thing left behind is your data and the context of your data. So I think we need to prepare for that. That's why our data intelligence has to be off chart, because we need to be ready to serve every single ask, but consistently a core. So I think that's where we need to really insist. You want to stay away from, oh, I want to make sure that all my websites are the same. That era is gone, right? When you stay away from, oh, but the branding of our dashboard has to be that's gone, because in 2 years time nobody will have a set of dashboards that are the same, because we're going to have a set of agents that are going to tell us. But really work now on making the intelligence, the context, and the meaning as clear and structured and visible possible. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, and it's coming at a time when the breadth and depth of data use and all of those permutations, it's never been greater in human history, right? So it's a unique problem that we're trying to grapple
You
with.
can't control it.
Right.
You can't control it with a human lead. You can control it. So if you can't win them, join them and trying to funnel them in the right direction.
Right, exactly, exactly. And to that point, how should leaders try to stay focused on the business problem, and how can they foster safe, successful innovation throughout the organization?
Ah, good point. So I think we've been discussing a bit AI being the proverbial hammer searching for nails, 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 right? So would you create an agent that is actually telling you the time? Possibly not.
Right.
But maybe you will create an agent that will tell you the time in the whole world when you're trying to make arrange a meeting, right? So,
Right. Or if
but
you're
you see that
traveling, I
that's where
suppose too, right? If you're traveling, maybe.
it's back.
Yeah.
Correct. It's back to there isn't always an AI answer. There should be. Like there never was an answer with Six Sigma from a quality point of view, because sometimes you have to do things even when there was no quality issue, right? And similarly, there's only, well, maybe there is one exception. I guess Excel is always have an answer, is always having an answer for anything. That's the only exception. But jokes aside, I think now that there's time to focus more on what we want. So that's why I'm pushing in the data consumer stories. The thing that people should really be concerned is what is that I want to do or I could do to increase the value. What is really the the causal effect, the causal nexus between what I'm seeing here, I'm observing my data, my company, whom I am, and what I'm trying to do. And focusing on that first, solving the problem first, before coming to people like me and saying, oh, if we put in place this dashboard, we're going to increase our new customer acquisition by 20%. And I will reply, fantastic, we should stop doing anything else and just do dashboards, right? Because that's so that's not real, of course. So now that you're not bothered by technology anymore, because that's by itself. Coding, why you want to code it? All the chats are doing all the coding. Focus on what is your issue and your problem. Making the right decision or triggering the right action. Focus on that. Let have really the understanding of what is your business strategy. Remove all the potential technological and AI distraction. Focus on what is out there as an opportunity and try to write it down, articulate it better. I don't, you don't even need to write it down nowadays. You sit on a chat and just tell and ask someone to produce the flipping data consumer story for Roberto so he shuts up, right? You can do that as well, but do that deeply, truly, right? And that's how you go around the problem that you're having with the proper innovation with AI, because AI doesn't do innovation, right? Up until now, as far as I know. And then you can become very philosophical about what innovation is, what real intuition is, and whether that's something one day we can replicate because it's just mimicking our electrical patterns in our brain, and blah blah blah. We don't go there. But up until now, I think we are still the repository, only repository of how you can make something new, and that's what we need to focus on. Foster the new ideas, and we try today. I think we are the muscle has gone a bit in atrophy. If I can be again going back to my metaphor of data personal trainer.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a fascinating way of putting it. I'm recalling from our prep call, a phrase stood out to me where you said, "My word is my bond, and my word is data." Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means, especially in a business
Yeah,
environment where decisions and customer experiences and AI systems all increasingly depend on data, like we're talking about?
totally. Yeah, I agree. So you added I think you added my word is data, but my word is my bond is the old, London Stock Exchange motto, right? And my point is, it's not new, right? The fact that something that is virtual is based on data and information, because what is my bond is in terms of in trading is I trust you that you're gonna be there because of what I observe you being before. So it's a data is a learned pattern. I know that you've been I can trust you. So I know, I forecast that once we make this agreement, you're gonna be there. So that my point is that is a strong thing that wasn't invented with AI, comes before. And if you think about money itself is virtual, because that $5 or $10 note is only a $10 note until the moment we both believe it is a $10 note. The moment in which you don't believe it anymore, it's paper, right? So, and in the digital world, the funniest thing is that if you don't have trust, you haven't got a product, and your product is made of data, because the experience that the customer having your product is through a screen or is through an agent, right? And so if you don't have the right data, you haven't got a product, because people don't trust you. So that's where I think the center of our action, the a continuous understanding of, if I do this, am I eroding trust? And am I actually able to be trusted by my partner? And what is my data, or the usage of their data I'm making, tells them about how much they can trust me.
Hmm.
So that's where the my word is my bond, and my word is data comes from.
Yeah, that's interesting. Perhaps money is the most influential theoretical concept that we have in our society, right? Perhaps, not to get all
Perhaps.
philosophical on us here. Um,
And by the way, nowadays I work completely cashless. So again, my money is made of data.
yeah,
So
that's
it's
true.
not I can touch it anymore. So
There you go. So the metaphor actually has more legs than maybe we would
yeah,
even think
it
of
does.
initially. So that's really spot on. So let's stay on the user component of it, right? So much of we
Yeah.
experience today as humans is mediated by a screen or a recommendation or a score or increasingly an automated decision. What happens when users, employees, or customers stop trusting what they see? To your point about trust, and how can leaders rebuild that trust if it's been damaged?
Yeah. So that's a typical thing that, and many times is happening because there's been an issue, right? So the first thing you should not do, and I've seen that happening many times, is basically don't fake it. So unfortunately, when things are on the newspaper, you need to own to what happened, right? So, and when I say that, it can be a company, but I can tell you that in the past, and it's been in the paper, so I can mention it. I was part of the BA British Airways. There was a problem. They were hacked, and my credit cards details were actually stolen. But the way in which the whole thing was managed from them, with the CEO basically sending you an email and telling you that from that day you would have had, access to a credit score company, one of those company that are checking whether someone is trying to steal your identity for 1 year on their cost. The credit card statement I was opening on my app was actually saying, "Don't worry, in the transaction, under the transaction, say we are aware of the problem, so you don't need to do anything." That kind of thing makes you feel okay. There was a boo boo, but actually has been recovered. And to that hand, I'm actually trusting them more
Yeah.
now than later, than before. So don't faking it, being open in what's happening, transparent, and allow the observability for people to understand what's happening in the background on your plans and how that is going to be recovered is incredibly important. So the transparency is important. And that transparency, by the way, is only possible if internally you're incredibly good at managing your data. You were probably not good because of what happened, but you need to, from then onwards, you need to be putting in place very good data intelligence and understanding of. So you remove all the silos and the tribes and treating it differently, because now the only orientation you need to have is to regain trust from your third parties, right? And so if you do that, I think you have a chance. And the other thing that if we look more widely, not just specifically because of something has happened in terms of a problem, taking care of your data, showing people how you manage their information is actually increasing also growth. because growth is in our ecosystemic economy is predicated on us exchanging more data, not less data. So exchanging more means I'm having ability to innovate more. So if I innovate more, I can grow more. So, but to exchange more, I need to make people, even between on a B2B scenario, we need to trust each other because otherwise we're not going to exchange, right? So that rebuilding trust, I would say that is even more important if you're trying not to, if something has happened that has been detrimental to your growth. So you need to be back not only reputationally but also financially on the right track, because again, without trust, you don't have a product, you don't grow, you don't innovate.
No, that's spot on. I think transparency goes a long way, and looking at it as an opportunity to build better processes, to inspire more confidence among your user base, that can really have a positive effect down the road for however terrible an immediate effect it might have in the short term. But let's stick on that point here. These systems maybe carry far greater consequences than any other computer systems in any point in human history, right? So, what questions should enterprise leaders be asking around the direct and indirect effects these systems have on people, teams, and society?
Well, I said that this is not data is not like a new oil, but it's more like a nuclear fusion, right? So there is a set of controls and ramification, repercussion that are seen but not completely understood across the board. Of course, they are the most evident ones. So we have a lot of, in increase, I would say, neo-Luddites. So there's a bit of a Luddism in a new form when people are not trusting the big companies are using a lot of data because you don't know what they're doing. And so there is a first thing to do for sure is, as a board or as an organism that is overseeing what's happening in data, you should always ask yourself, if I mean no harm, should I do this just because I can? For us data leaders, this has to become a sort of a Jiminy Cricket or a kind of a new worm that is continuing. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? It has to be there, right? We need to be almost paranoid about this because it's the risks, the issues if something goes wrong are so much overweighing the cost of a control that it's important to have that. So assessing what you're doing and building that into your methodology from a impact point of view, it's important, but not only from a, let's say, cost, but also from a wider definition of value, because nowadays we are just defining value as more or less more orders, more money, right? So, but I think if you are, as I say in the book, if you want to become a impact company, right? An impact company means that you are now not just making money, but you are trying to create a win-win scenario in which you are also doing the right thing for the world. Then in your business case, you need to build an element of what's the additional definition of value. Am I increasing my corporate social responsibility with this? Am I reducing my emissions? Am I actually, reducing the exploitation of resources, or the misuse of some rare earth material? So you need to create that into the cost and benefit, because today we're very flat on the economical bit. I think we need to increase in a second dimension, which is what's my ethical is kind of monochromatic in a way, but what's my wider impact on society and human beings if I do this, right? And that's difficult to have as a conversation because it's not something we've used to have, and some of us probably don't have the expertise to understand exactly what it is. And I had a bet with my daughters 3 years ago that companies in 10 years would have hired philosophers to as consultants. I already won the bet. so, so the reality of this is that this is so complex and so new. But again, it's not the AI technical problem. It's us human, the problem in a way, and also the solution. So it's so much more fascinating and interesting that, yeah, data excellence become one of those things I like to offer as a support to make things better. But it's not going to be the only thing we need, actually. We have it takes a village, right, to say, or it takes a team.
Right. And ultimately, what is more human than going beyond the monochromatic and leaning into those uncomfortable questions and really thinking about
It
the
is.
long term impacts of those, right? Roberto, before we let you go, lightning round questions for you. First, what is the most important characteristic of a high quality application?
Adoption. If I can say in G, we're having a formula that was saying efficiency equals quality times adoption. So you can have something that's low quality by increasing incredible adoption, and it's good. Excel, for example. Or you can have something that is because it's adopted by everyone. Or you can have something incredibly sophisticated that use nobody, so your efficiency will be zero. So I think adoption is the most important thing.
What should software development organizations be doing more of?
Talk more to their consumers and really, really work on data consumer stories that are incredibly detailed and very well establishing the boundaries of their actions.
And what should software development organizations be doing less of?
Trying to demonstrate that the next thing is better than the previous thing.
That's a good point. And finally, what is something that you are hopeful for?
I want to be a bit emphatic here, right? So I hope that AI is going and data is going to give us an answer to, you know, growth and wealth for everyone at a sustainable cost.
That's a great vision to end on. And Roberto, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating discussion. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you to all your listeners, and goodbye.
Such a great time chatting with Roberto. Maybe I can get an invitation to sail with him someday. You can find a link to his book, Data Excellence: How Data Leadership Can Drive Stronger Organizational Performance, in our podcast notes. Thanks to our producers Joe Stella and Sam Susala, editor Ian Lippincott, and graphic designer Carly Searles. Subscribe to Ready Test Go on your favorite podcast player, or watch our video episodes on our website, applause.com. You can also subscribe to the Applause YouTube channel. The handle for that is applause.com. If you have any feedback or a guest recommendation, we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and reach out to us directly at podcasts@applause.com. Thank you for joining us.